My name is Serena Vale. I am 32 years old. I own 4 artisan bakeries in Portland, Oregon, and people like to describe what I have built as inspiring. I have learned to accept that word gracefully. What I have never learned to accept is the assumption underneath it, the idea that success makes the story easier to carry. That once you have built something beautiful, the ugly parts stop mattering. They do not. They live quietly in the background of every good day, waiting for the right sound to bring them forward. For me, that sound is a phone ringing, not any phone call. A specific kind. The kind where the screen lights up again and again with a number you never saved but somehow recognize anyway, the way you recognize a smell from childhood. Not with your mind but with something older and less forgiving. That morning I was standing at my prep counter reviewing invoices when my phone started going. I let it ring. 5 minutes. 10. 20. I kept checking temperatures, signing papers, pretending my hands were not shaking over the edge of the counter, because the last time I sat and waited for those particular people, I was 8 years old. I was wearing a coat 2 sizes too big. I was sitting on a hard plastic chair in a room that smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. And I was listening to adults tell me it would only be for a little while. My mother left with my brother, my father left with my sister, and I was the one nobody had room for. I was placed in a children's home like a piece of furniture that did not fit the new apartment, stored carefully, promised to be collected soon, and then quietly forgotten. For years, there was nothing. No calls. No birthday cards. No footsteps. Then one interview changed everything. One article described what I had built, what I had survived, what I had made of the nothing they left me with. And suddenly, after more than 2 decades of silence, the phone started ringing again. I want to tell you what happened when I finally answered. But first, let me take you back to where it all started. Before everything broke, we looked ordinary from the outside. We lived in a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona, a beige house on a quiet street with a cracked front path and a lemon tree in the backyard that produced just enough fruit to make us feel like we were tending to something. My mother, Patricia, worked at an elementary school. My father, Robert, managed logistics for a regional shipping company. My older brother, Eli, was the kind of child adults described as easy. My younger sister, Gracie, was loud and funny and stuck her fingers in everything, and I was in the middle. Old enough to notice things. Young enough to still believe that noticing them meant I could somehow prepare for what was coming. There were good years. Weekend breakfasts with too much syrup. Backyard evenings that ran past dark. The particular safety of knowing what the next morning would look like before you fell asleep. Then my father lost his job. He said it was temporary. He said the company had restructured. Then he stopped saying much at all. My mother picked up extra hours at school and the air at home changed before I could name why. Bills appeared on the kitchen counter. Conversations that used to happen at full volume moved behind closed doors. Adults have a specific way of smiling when they are trying to convince children that nothing is wrong, too fast. Too wide, gone before it reaches their eyes. I learned to read that smile the way other children learn to read clocks. My father started sleeping on the couch. My mother stopped laughing at things that used to make her laugh. Eli stayed in his room. Gracie became clingy in the way small children do when they feel the ground shifting, and I became the one who listened. I listened at the top of the stairs. I listened through walls. I listened because no one was telling me the truth and I had a feeling the truth had my name somewhere in it. The night I understood how serious it had become, I heard my mother say she could not keep living this way. My father told her to leave then. The silence that followed was not a pause. It was something closing permanently. A week later, they sat us at the kitchen table and told us they were separating. They used soft voices and careful phrases. They said it was not our fault. They said they both loved us. They said families could change shape and still be families. Then reality started appearing between the sentences. Who went where? What was affordable? What made logistical sense? My mother wanted Eli because he was calm and easy to move around with. My father wanted Gracie because she cried when she was away from him. Nobody said my name first. Nobody said what about Serena until I had already heard enough to know the answer would not sound like love. That night I stood in the hallway outside their bedroom door. My mother's voice came through the wood. You take her, my father answered. I can barely manage one right now. She's too much. Then my mother said the sentence I carried under my skin for the next 2 decades, she said, just for a little while. The children's home can keep her until we get sorted. Keep her. Like I was something that needed storing. 2 days later, my mother packed my clothes into a small suitcase, quickly, without folding them properly. My father drove. Nobody used the word abandonment. They used the word temporary. They used the phrase just until things settle. They used the word best. The children's home sat behind a chain-link fence with a faded painted sign. A woman at the front desk smiled at me the way adults smile when something terrible is happening and they want to be remembered as kind about it. My mother fixed my collar at the door even though nothing was wrong with it. My father signed papers without looking up. My mother said, "We'll come back for you soon." As soon as things are stable, my father finally looked at me and said, "Be good, okay?" It won't be long. I stood there and waited for one of them to change their mind. For one face to crack. For someone to decide this was insane and take me back to the car. They stood up instead. My mother kissed my forehead. My father picked up his pen, then they walked out. They did not turn around, they did not wave, they did not come back. The first night at the children's home, I slept in a narrow bed with a plastic mattress cover that made a sound every time I moved. The room held 4 girls. Nobody spoke after lights out. I kept my shoes on because I believed, the way only a child can believe something with her whole body, that my parents might come late and I would need to be ready to leave quickly. That was the kind of child I still was then. Not angry. Just prepared. Every morning I positioned myself near the window with the best view of the parking lot. Every car that pulled in made my chest tighten. Every sedan that was not ours made it release again. By the second week, the staff stopped saying when your family comes back and started saying if there are any updates. There is an enormous difference between those 2 sentences. One keeps a child breathing. The other teaches her not to expect air. I learned the routines fast because routines were safer than feelings. Make the bed tight. Line up for meals. Keep your tray straight. Don't cry where the older kids can see you. A girl who had been there longer asked me on my 4th day whether my parents had said they were coming back. I said yes. She shrugged and said, "They all say that." Then she walked away like she had handed me information rather than a wound. I stopped watching the parking lot after that, but I still listened for footsteps. My case worker, Miss Calloway, wore soft cardigans and spoke in a voice that never quite lost its gentleness. She called my parents. She left messages. She mailed forms. She told me they were going through a difficult transition. What I eventually pieced together was simpler than that. My mother had moved into a rental across town with Eli. My father had found temporary housing with Gracie until he got back on his feet. They had managed to build new versions of their lives with the 2 children they had chosen to keep. It was only me who had become too complicated. That truth arrived in pieces and then all at once. First there were no calls. Then there were no visits. Then there was paperwork. Then there was a phrase I overheard from around the corner of Miss Calloway's office one afternoon when she did not know I was there. She said, "We may need to move her into long-term foster placement if the family remains non-responsive." Non-responsive. Such a clean, professional word for choosing not to come back. Foster care taught me things childhood was never supposed to teach. My first placement was with a couple who already had 3 boys and took in foster children for the monthly stipend. They were not cruel in any dramatic way. That almost made it worse. They were simply indifferent, the kind of indifferent that hollows you out slowly and evenly. My clothes stayed in trash bags for months. I slept on a pull-out couch in a room with no door. When relatives visited, I was quietly asked to make myself scarce. I became very good at disappearing before anyone needed to ask twice. My second placement had too many children and not enough adult attention. Food ran out quickly. Privacy did not exist. I changed schools again and went through the exhausting ritual of being the new girl with no clean answer when teachers asked about home. Then came the placement I do not talk about much. A woman who volunteered at charity events and called every child sweetheart in public. In private she was precise about where to press. She told me that maybe if I were easier to love, someone would have kept me. She never raised her hand. She did not need to. She aimed at the part of me that still believed I had been worth staying for. I learned an ugly truth in that house. Once a child has already been left, the world tends to assume she can absorb a little more damage. Adults saw a girl who was quiet and functional and called her resilient, when really she had simply gotten very skilled at bleeding where nobody could see. What saved me did not look like rescue at first. It started in a kitchen. One of my placements sent me to help at a community meal program on Saturdays. Free labor reframed as character development, the way foster children's time always seemed to get renamed into something that sounded like a gift given to them rather than work extracted from them. An older man ran the baking station. His name was Mr. Gerald Okafor, but everyone called him Chef regardless of the setting. Silver at his temples. Flour on his shirt. A voice so steady it made instructions feel like shelter. He showed me how to measure flour properly. How yeast had to wake up in warm water, not hot. How bread dough changed when you gave it time instead of force. The first time I pulled a tray of dinner rolls from the oven and watched them sitting there, risen and golden and real, I could not move for a moment. They had transformed because I had followed every step and stayed patient long enough. Care had led somewhere. People had always been unpredictable. Rules had always shifted. Love had always come with a quiet exit. But baking responded to consistency. It rewarded attention. It returned something warm for every careful thing you gave it. I signed up for every kitchen shift available after that. I learned biscuits, cinnamon rolls, braided loaves, simple fruit pies. Chef Gerald did not flatter me. He made me start over when I rushed. He corrected me when I cut corners. But he also treated me like someone capable of mastery, not someone in need of management. There is a vast difference between pity and respect. I was starving for one and had been given too much of the other my entire life. I aged out of the foster system at 18 with one duffel bag, a folder of paperwork nobody fully explains until it is too late, and a scholarship to a community college culinary program that felt almost embarrassingly small compared to the size of what I needed to build. I moved to Portland. Shared apartment with 2 other women who did not care where I came from as long as rent arrived on time and the sink stayed clean. That was one of the first freedoms adulthood gave me. Nobody asked me to perform gratitude simply for being allowed to remain. I worked breakfast shifts at a diner and cleaned equipment at a small neighborhood bakery until my hands went numb from hot water and sanitizer. I did homework at bus stops. I memorized inventory margins while waiting tables. I lived on coffee, dry toast, and the kind of determination that sits right next to anger if you lean close enough to feel the heat. By my early 20s I was selling my own pastries at a weekend market, brown butter muffins, honey oat rolls, cardamom buns that sold out before 10 in the morning when the air was cold enough for people to want comfort. People came back. They brought friends. They asked where my shop was. I did not have one yet. But for the first time, yet felt more powerful than never, that market was where I met Clara, who had a booth nearby and the fastest business instincts I had ever encountered wrapped inside the most relaxed exterior. She looked at my pricing one morning and told me I was undercharging by 30% and smiling about it like it was a personality. I laughed. Nobody had ever critiqued me casually without trying to diminish me first. She became my first real adult friendship. The kind where someone shows up with coffee during a financial crisis and also knows how to read a balance sheet like it contains gossip. My first full bakery opened when I was 27. White walls, warm wood shelving, a long communal table in the center because I wanted strangers to sit near each other and feel slightly less alone while eating something made with care. I hired 2 young adults aging out of foster care in the first year because I understood exactly what it meant to enter adulthood with no network and nowhere soft to land. I was not building a business with a sad origin story attached like decoration. I was building something that turned what had nearly destroyed me into the opposite. By 32, what started as one narrow bakery window had grown into 4 locations across the city. Then I agreed to do a television interview. It was supposed to be a short local feature about small business and community impact. But near the end, the interviewer asked where my commitment to supporting young people in the foster system came from personally. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was finally ready. I told the truth. Not every detail, but enough. I said I had been placed in a children's home at 8 years old. I said I had grown up in foster care. I said everything I had built was rooted in the kind of support I wished someone had fought to give me earlier. The clip went online that evening. A larger account shared it. A newspaper picked it up and wrote a full story with the word abandoned in the headline. I stared at that word for a long time. I felt no shame. Only clarity. 3 days later, the calls began. My brother Eli. My sister Gracie. My mother. My father. One after another. Voicemails and voices I recognized immediately because the nervous system stores certain sounds in places logic cannot reach. They said there was so much I did not know. They said they had been looking for me. They said they were sorry, they were older now, life had been hard, my father was not well. I let every call ring out. I sat with Tessa, Clara, and asked her to do what she does best. By the end of the week, the picture was clear and ugly. My mother had divorced again after years of financial difficulties. My father was living alone in a 1-bedroom rental. His health declining. My brother had lost his job under circumstances he was calling one mistake. My sister had spent years receiving different versions of the story about me and had recently pulled back from both parents when she finally started asking real questions. Life had done what conscience never managed to. It had cornered them. I agreed to meet them once. On my terms. After closing time at my flagship location, my ovens, my table, my rules, they arrived together on a Tuesday evening. My father looked smaller than memory had kept him. My mother still twisted her bag strap when she was nervous. My brother carried himself with the careful politeness of someone who needed mercy and could not justify asking for it. My sister looked at me the way people look at a place they have been trying to find for years. I let them in, I let them explain. I let them rearrange the past until almost every sharp edge had been smoothed. Then I walked behind the counter and returned with 4 folders, placement records, school transfer documents, case worker notes, a birthday intake form with no emergency contact listed. I placed one in front of each of them. My hands did not shake. I said, "You keep using words like hard and complicated and overwhelmed. Let me simplify it. You did not lose me. You left me." Nobody moved. I told them about the children's home. The window I sat beside watching the parking lot. The foster home where my clothes stayed in garbage bags. The woman who smiled in public and whispered cruelty in private. The nights I rationed food. The years I apologized for existing because somewhere along the way I had absorbed the belief that needing anything was dangerous. My mother cried halfway through. My father stared at the paperwork. My brother covered his mouth. My sister wept openly. I did not stop. I had waited too long to be interrupted by tears that should have arrived 2 decades earlier. Then I told them about Chef Gerald. About Clara. About every person with no blood obligation and no legal requirement who had stayed anyway and helped me become whole. I said, "You are not sitting across from a broken child who survived by luck. You are sitting across from a woman who was rebuilt by strangers. That is your answer. That is what you chose when you chose to leave." My father said he was not well. He said he wanted to make things right before time ran out. My brother asked carefully whether, given everything I had built, there might be a way to help the family through this difficult stretch. And there it was, not love that had finally outrun shame. Need that had finally run out of other options. I looked at each of them and said the most honest sentence I had ever spoken to my family. I did not build this life so the people who abandoned me could come back and treat it as somewhere safe to land. I told my mother that thinking about me every day while doing nothing was not the same as motherhood. I told my father that an apology timed to a diagnosis was still late. I told my brother that being a child once explained his silence, being an adult for 20 years did not. I told them I hoped they found peace. I hoped they told the truth. I hoped they learned to carry what they had done without asking me to absorb the weight of making them feel forgiven. Then I set my terms plainly: no money. No access. No healing family photo. No open door that swung according to their need. If any future contact happened, it would be on my terms, honest, and in writing first. My father wept quietly. My mother apologized until the word lost its shape. My brother asked if there was anything at all they could do. I said, yes. Tell the true version. Stop calling what happened a misunderstanding. Stop using the word temporary. Say it correctly: you left your daughter in care and built your lives around her absence. That is the truth. Live in it. They left without touching the coffee I had set out from habit. I locked the door behind them and stood alone in the quiet bakery, low lights. The smell of tomorrow's dough cold proofing in the back, the particular silence of a room after something long overdue has finally been said out loud. My partner arrived 10 minutes later because Clara had texted him when the meeting started. He did not ask how it went. He just opened his arms. I stepped into them. The real revenge, if you want to call it that, was not making them feel pain, it was letting them see exactly what I had become without them: the life, the work, the chosen family, the purpose. None of it belonged to them. They did not get to arrive at the end and call themselves part of what survived. They were the fire. Not the rebuilding. Children remember who stayed. They remember who made excuses. And when those children grow up, they deserve more than late apologies. They deserve safety. They deserve dignity. They deserve the right to draw a boundary without being called ungrateful. I have forgiven some things, mostly so I would not have to keep carrying poison every time their names surfaced. But forgiveness is not access. Compassion is not a key. Family is not proven by blood. Family is proven by who stays when staying costs something.